Hang on. I gotta give Zoom. Hang on 1 second. I apologize. I'm on a Mac and I have to give it permissions to share the screen.
You want me to give you permission to share the screen?
Nope, I got it. Hope I have it anyways. Hang on 1 second. It's just a setting on my PC. All right, can you see that screen?
Yes.
It says PMO on the left side. All right, I'm gonna go through some slides first. You can see that slide?
Yeah.
Black slide? Okay, all right. Good news. Sorry about that. All right, so this is just going to be a walkthrough of GE Lighting's IT PMO management system. So talk about how we run our PMO and what we try to get out of it, and go through the Smartsheet tool, which is what we use to kind of drive everything. So I'm going to go pretty quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions. But I'm going to kind of move pretty quickly, so I'll skip over a lot of stuff here at the beginning, or it might feel like it, but we'll look at everything. So this is the quick introduction. Take a look at what Smartsheet is all about from a high level, and then kind of walk through how the PMO operates. That's me. All right, so we put this in place. I probably should have gone back and looked, but 3 or 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago at this point, I don't remember. But the first goal was to eliminate PowerPoint-based updates. So we would have a weekly PMO meeting, and all these poor project managers would have to assemble decks with the latest updates and issues and then share them. And then you get in the meeting, and like I had trouble sharing at the beginning of this meeting, you're waiting for people to share, and there's a lot of shuffling around and all that kind of stuff. So we wanted to eliminate that. 1, 2 was to have, just one solution where we could communicate status throughout the organization. So within teams and executive management using the same tool, drive some consistent project management practices. So mostly that's around giving everybody templates and the same way to work. And then the last couple here, right, should be easy to use, and it needs to be manageable. And I will say in Smartsheets, about Smartsheet is that for the most part, it just works. It's very rare, maybe like once or twice a year at the very most, that I have to go in and tweak something, that didn't fire correctly or whatever. And to do that, I built this tool using just out-of-the-box Smartsheet functionality. You'll see in a second that Smartsheet comes with more than that. So this is just a real high level. So it can be used for all kinds of things. At the highest level, I usually describe Smartsheet to people as it's really like a web-based version of Excel with some automations that you can do. So I could build almost everything that I have here in Excel, except for the automation, and it would also break all the time probably. It's still using a lot of the same ideas and thoughts. For example, you'll see in a second, a Smartsheet is just a sheet, looks like an Excel spreadsheet. And I can write formulas in that spreadsheet that are very similar to how you write them in Excel. It's basically the same language. Skip over that. So these are the components of Smartsheets, and we'll look at all of these. So, right, the main thing is just that there's a grid. So it's just a spreadsheet is all it really is. And Smartsheet lets you look at that in different ways. So you can look at a Gantt chart view of that sheet, assuming it's a project plan. You can look at it in card view for more agile type work. And you can look at it in a calendar format and again, it depends on the data that you have, that those things may or may not be appropriate, but it lets you switch between these views pretty easily. So that's the first thing is the sheets. Second thing is dashboards. I don't know what the difference between a dashboard and a portal is. They're the same thing in Smartsheet. It's just how you would use it, but it lets you build, and again, this is where we'll spend our time, but this lets you build kind of a interface to all the messy stuff that's happening below. And that's what most of the work is around. Forms. So you can build a form, and a form is used to collect new data. So whenever somebody fills out a form, it adds a new record to your sheet. And that's where we will start in a second. You can write reports. So you can summarize and filter the data in your sheet down to what you need it to be. And you'll see some of that as well here. And then last but not least is there's automated workflows, like I mentioned. So we'll probably look at them, but basically you can kind of see that screenshot there. It's kind of drag and drop, very simple workflows, but pretty powerful. And you can see over on the left the kind of things that they can be used for. We use them for status updates, approval requests, and just a lot of notifications that happen. And I use it as a tool to clean up the data in the back end. So when we close a project, there's some data that gets left behind, for want of a better description, and I use this automation to just go through and clean that up. So we might see that later on if there's time. I mentioned earlier on that for Smartsheet, it's out of the box. So I don't use any of these tools. So over on the left are add-ons that Smartsheet sells. That expands what you can do with the tool. For the most part, they're pretty expensive, and they're a whole new thing. Everybody would have to learn a whole new tool. Control Center, in particular, is their sort of a PMO management tool that you could. It's all what I've built is for the most part pre-built in Control Center. It's probably a little more reliable. It's probably a little more speedy, probably a little more flexible to do some things, but costs tens of thousands of dollars. So we decided to pass that by. And then there's all these integrations and things you can do with these other systems. We've looked at Jira. That's about it. We've looked at it. We haven't taken the leap, but maybe someday. So Smartsheet is great, but just a couple things just about the tool. So you can't do dynamic lookup. So in my spreadsheet, I have a list of project. There's a field for project manager. That's a bad example. Because that is dynamic based on all the users in the system. But I have a drop down for category program for the project, and the programs, you'll see them. There's 5 of them, and somebody just picks from that list and they edit it. If we come up with a new program, I would have to go into probably multiple places and hard code that new drop down value. Just not the end of the world, but it's a pain in the butt. Dashboards, which we'll look at, text is not dynamic. So the only way to get text to appear on a dashboard is to type it in. Sometimes the data, which they call metrics, are not dynamic. Basically, the dashboard points at a specific cell in the spreadsheet and displays that value. You can imagine how that could break. Formatting is kind of limited. Formulas can get confusing. Like I said, they're nearly identical to Excel formulas, but the way that it handles kind of cross sheet references makes them hard to read and long to read, and that just makes it troubleshooting difficult. And you can't. I was trying to think of other oddities. You can't, if you have a date field, you can't default the date to whatever today's date is. Can't do it. And that's just weird. It would take them half an hour to put that feature in the system. And there's some other just weird things that you can't do in the system, which we won't spend any time on. They're just annoyances for the most part. And that is that. So I'm going to jump right over here to Smart. Any questions to start with? Hopefully I'm still online. All right. So
yeah, you're online.
Okay. All right. Sure. I can see it up at the top of the screen, actually. So that's good. So I'm going to just kind of go through process at a high level and kind of what it looks like, and kind of show you that most of what I'll show you is kind of the results of everything that's built. And then we'll go into the master sheet, which is where most of the magic happens. And I'll show you how that's lined up. So for us, somebody wants to start a new project. So I should describe our PMO. Our PMO is there's only a dozen or 18 people that regularly attend our IT PMO. We meet every other week nowadays, and it covers all areas of IT. So infrastructure, applications, and data are the way that we segregate things, but all those teams, so BI teams and the finance application team and the supply chain application team, everybody gets together. And we use that to manage what we call projects, which kind of from PMI definitions are something that are 40 or 80 hours or longer, and that there's a somewhat significant budget for. We argue about it all the time. Is this a project, or is this the other kind of work we just call enhancements, which is just core development? We kind of argue about where that line is once a year, once every 2 years. We get into discussing what that should really look like. But again, not important. And we use that meeting. That meeting is used to update IT leadership, address any issues that are out there, and then just provide updates to the whole team. So that's kind of what the PMO does. So somebody wants to.
I'm listening right now.
Somebody wants to bring a project to the IT PMO for activation or approval. They start here. So they go, I have a whole Teams channel, which has links and instructions on where, a user should start to do all these things. So that directs them to here. And they just fill out this form with some basic information. So I already pre-filled this out before we talked. I put in test project 1214. And I just put some basic data, and that's all it takes. And so when they submit that, I'll click submit. Click submit. All right. So that data has gone into the database, for want of a better word. I, as the PMO leader, will get an alert in my email and also via Teams saying, hey, somebody submitted a new project. You need to go do something. And really, those are two things. One, I make sure that person is prepared for the PMO meeting that's coming up next, with what they need to do for project activations. We do use PowerPoint slides because it only happens once, and we have some templates that we use to show budget and who's involved and what the purpose of the project and what the deliverables are and all that kind of fun stuff. So I talk to that user, make sure they're good, and then once the project is activated in the PMO. And a dirty little secret, we've only turned down one project in the 7 years that I've been here. So we don't usually the project has a life by the time it comes to the PMO. What I need to do is go into Smartsheet and do some work. So this is kind of this main Smartsheet screen. Over on here on the left are what are called workspaces. This is where everything is stored, and a workspace is just a set of folders where you can store everything. So when somebody submits a new project, I, as the PMO leader, I go into this project workspace template, and I right-click on it, and I do a save as new. Copies everything over. It's full of formulas and reports and dashboards and spreadsheets. It copies all those over, and then I have to go in and update probably about a dozen things. It takes me 5 to 10 minutes to do that each time there's a new project. And most of that is because of the limitations of Smartsheet that I mentioned, that you can't have dynamic text and dynamic data. So I have to go in and update some things, update some filters on reports. And once I do that, I just send it off to the project lead. And I'm not going to go through all that because it would be really boring to watch me. So we are going to look at we're going to look at this project, which exists already. So Lighting Legacy Archive. So this project was, over the years, we collected a bunch of archive data that we kept. So if you follow the news over the last few years, you know that GE has gone through many changes. One of those was spinning off GE Lighting, and before that, spinning off some sister companies that we worked with, GE Appliances and a company called Current. And as each of those companies left and we shut down facilities and stopped using legacy applications, we kept all the data for the most part because people are afraid to delete it. We ended up kind of owning that, the infrastructure team, because it was sitting in our, sitting on our servers. And we finally said, all right, we got to clean this stuff up. And we launched this project. So that's what the project was about. So in here, there are these, things. So the control files, I thought that expanded, I guess not, this is the meat of, and we'll look at this later, but this is kind of the meat of the project status of the, this is what controls all the data that's going to get displayed on the next screen we look at. These dashboard widgets, they're on a dashboard. I provide to project managers so they can customize their dashboards if they want to. We won't look at that, but those are just template widgets, if you will. There's a bunch of reports that get used to display all this stuff. And then last but not least, I mentioned that one of the goals is to have consistent practices. As part of this setup, there's standardized project templates, and really there's two, one for agile projects and one for waterfall projects. And so all this stuff goes to the project manager. It's set up and ready to run when they get it, but they can swap in these different plans if they want to or need to. And usually I at least have a brief conversation with them about that. So that's kind of what it looks like, what it contains in the back end. And this is the result of all that. So after the project's set up and I go in and tweak it, and the kinds of things that I tweak are, I have to type in the name of the project up here because you can't do it any other way. And that's all these boxes that just have words you just type in. This, for example, down here is a report. And I have to go into that report and just change the filter to the project number that I just created so that it filters properly. And I have to do that in 2 or 3 different places. I've done this status log update down here. But anyways, the end result of all that is on day 1 of a new project, the project manager gets this dashboard and a project plan template and other templates for a RAID log and team roster and that kind of basic stuff. And they're ready to go. Their first job is to kind of do the first status update. And they're off and running. This project was a very long running project that started in 2020. And we just finished it this week, actually, which is why I had it open. This project has had a number of updates. And so we'll just kind of look at what this looks like. So what a user sees is description of the project, which the project manager creates, some useful links to take some actions or, so to get to their project plan, update project status anytime they want, update project vitals, like who the sponsor is, they can do that anytime. There's some useful data when the next PMO meeting is, a reminder when they submitted their last status update. You can imagine for a number of people, it's usually 2 weeks ago since our PMO meeting is every 2 weeks. And then it pulls some data from the project plan. So we'll look at the plan. Actually, I should open it. We'll open the plan in a second. So it pulls out, highlights at-risk tasks, which are based on this flag that's in the project. It summarizes the milestones and what their status is, so they can see what the timelines are. This is test data that we're looking at. It's not live data. So if some things are a couple funky dates or whatever, just bear with me. That's just how it is. Over here on the left is kind of is what we look at in the PMO meeting, which you'll see in the next, not the next slide, but the slide after that. So this is just a view. That's why it says PMO view. So looking at this, I can say, oh, okay, good. That's what my manager is going to see in the PMO meeting. Some summary data and the status update log. And this would be, again, I was messing with the data, so I kind of broke it. This is a historical record of all the status updates that have been made for this project. And normally the project phase would be in order from like initiating to launching to executing to closing. broke it, so they're not showing it in order. But this would be a record for all the status. If they do an update every week and it's a year-long project, there would be 52 rows worth of data in here, and you could go back to any date and see if it was green, yellow, red, or what have you. So this is where, as a project manager, I go to manage everything on a day-to-day basis. I'll open the project plans. We just take a quick look at how that works. So this is the template. These are just instructions up at the top. I will ditch those. So again, I kind of simplified some of this data because I don't want to share all the details and it's confusing. So I just kind of cleaned this up and made some statuses and dates and everything. So one, you can see there's a Gantt view of the project, which is useful. I can switch that. I can turn that on and off by using these different options. And one thing I'll just mention about the way we manage projects using the PMO here. I'm just checking the time. In an the earliest iteration of this tool, I tied these project plans live to the dashboard. In other words, any changes that were made to the project plan, specifically around milestones and dates, were immediately reflected in the dashboards. And what I realized after didn't take too terribly long, but was that really was not, it's too much pressure on a project manager to have everything updated, totally up to date all the time, because they don't have control of who will ultimately see the dashboard. The CEO could see the dashboard on any given day and start asking questions, number one. And number two, it just wasn't necessary, and it really complicated the back end structure of this whole thing. So early iteration, the dates, let's say for milestones, appeared automatically on dashboards. In this version, I can control that. So this column is the milestone column. We ask project managers to give us 3 milestones: project start, go live date, and project end. They can go in this drop down here, and they can create all kinds of milestones. And they can also just type their own name for a milestone. So they can create milestone tasks however they need to, link them to other tasks however they need to, do whatever they need to, have the dates that they need to, so on and so forth. And I'll show you what, I think it's go live. Yes, so I think go live. So this date is September 4th. Just keep that in mind for a second. So, so this is based on the template, and it's a project plan. You're all project managers. You know exactly what you're looking at. So if I go back to the dashboard, there's this little section up here. And we will look at this next. I skipped over something. We will look at this next. So one of the pieces of this system, besides me handing a dashboard and a plan and templates over to a project manager, there are weekly status update requests. So every Tuesday, I believe it is, an email gets sent to each project manager saying, hey, need you to update the status of your project. And in that status, they can update all kinds of things, but we ask them to update specifically these are kind of the big ones: scope, schedule, and budget status at a high level, and then, you know, update these dates if necessary. And those dates, these dates that we're looking right here, are what we display on the dashboard. So these dates, all this section over here, is what's going to filter up through the organization, and they don't match the plan. So this little table says, hey, you have a project start date, and your status update and your plan have the same date. Green check mark. That's great. Go live, you're not showing the same dates. Red, red X. You should probably go investigate that. If you know why they're different, cool. If you made them different on purpose, cool. If they're different and you don't know why, you need to go into your plan and update some things or do another status update and keep those things in line. But all this stuff over here is what the project manager sees. This is what people outside of the project manager and their direct supervisor usually would see. So this is the project view. How do I And I can't get to these tabs. Sorry about that. All right, so this is, if I switch over to my email, I forced this to happen today since it's not a Tuesday. If we were to open up my email, and I'm not going to try to move windows around and do that, but there you'd see an email in my inbox that says from Smartsheet, status update requested for project legacy archive. And there's a link. And when I click that link, it brings me to this status update form. All the data is pre-filled. So this is what I reported in my last status update, but I can go through and change anything I want. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to, yeah, down here. So I mentioned the things that we asked project managers to update are the scope, schedule, and cost, the dates, and then there's two other things which are more important. So one is we call project dynamics. So this is just the current status. What's going on with your project? What did you just deploy? How are you doing? You know, where are you at in your testing phase? Are things on schedule or not? And then path to green, this is really just risks. So if your project is not green, what are the steps you're taking to get it back there? And that's what they are. So I'm going to just go in and change this project dynamics thing. I'm just going to, like, this is a test update. With a little luck, we will see it later. So once a week, every project manager gets this update. Takes them maybe 2 minutes if they're on top of their project to fill out. Again, they don't have to update any of these, most of these fields. In certain phases, it's just the dynamics and the path to green. And they can also, from their dashboard, they can go in and update their project status anytime between that 1 week thing. So I'm going to do this and I'm going to click submit. It submits that update. We'll come back to that. So going up a level, this is the infrastructure teams dashboard. So if you look here, so I'll just start at the top here. So this is basic information for the infrastructure team. This is just some free form text. I own the infrastructure team as well as the PMO and 73 other things. So I can update this text. This is just some things that are going on outside of projects, latest updates, vacations that are coming up that might impact projects, whatever. It can be whatever I want it to be. Summary of the projects. I got 2 projects open. 2 of them are green, no yellow, no red. This is our program type of program. Ours are almost always compliance. And then this is just kind of a little graph of just where projects are at on the timeline. You look down here, this box area here, this is what the project manager saw on their dashboard where it said PMO view. This is exactly the same thing. So it's pulling from the same data. It's live data. So I'm going to refresh my screen here in a second. You'll see that the dynamic still says what it said before. So it pulls from the same data. So if I look at the project spreadsheet or this team spreadsheet or dashboard, apologies, they show the same exact data all the time, no matter what. And then it really just summarizes everything. And the purpose of this is, right, I, as the manager of this team, I can open this thing once in a while, check that everything's green, or, check that everything is where I expect it to be at, reach out to the project leads as I need to, make sure things are ready for the next PMO meeting. And more importantly, I can, and I can use this within my team. So I can use this for team meetings. We have a weekly team meeting and I can pull this up and make sure everything's good and so on and so forth. And down here, it just summarizes some other things. If we had any projects that were on hold, if we had more than 3 projects, they would appear down here. And then we have a backlog as well. This, just as a comment, this is kind of what I meant about dynamics. The dashboards aren't very dynamic. So I have to have all these placeholders here and they will appear on the dashboard, even if there's no data, which drives me nuts. But that's just the way it is. So Again, just one of the limitations of the tool, not a deal breaker or anything else. So same thing. I'm going to refresh my screen. Find the button. And we should see the project status has changed, the project dynamics. Yep. So under project dynamics, you can see it says this is a test update, which is what I typed into that status update. That update usually happens 5 to 20 seconds after it's made. If we were to go back to the project spreadsheet, again, it would show all the same information, so on and so forth. So this is the team. And then after that, this rolls up to the PMO. So this is our PMO dashboard. This cuts across, I mentioned before, we've organized things into 3 teams: applications, data, and infrastructure. And this summarizes all that. So this is the sheet this is the dashboard that we pull up every 2 weeks in our PMO meeting to review what's going on. So just to count, some counts. This is kind of the history. So one of the reasons we had applications used to be split into supply chain and finance and HR and legal and so on and so forth. We've been doing less and less projects over the past year. We're doing more enhancement work, which we manage in Jira. So the numbers are just down here. So we kind of revamped how we do things. This shows projects waiting activation. And this should be showing something. Oh, it's because I need to refresh my screen, I think. 1 second. Yeah, okay. So that's that form that I filled out. The very first thing that I did, I put in a project called Test Project 12/14/2023. So that's sitting in this bucket. It's waiting for activation. Hey, project lead, Bill Cook. We see that, you're on the agenda. Tell us what your project's about, and we'll approve it, basically. And then once it's approved, I, as the PMO lead, go in and do that manual work to create the workspace and get everything going. So that's summarized here. Any projects that are on hold, which are different than backlog or closed, they're just temporarily on hold. And then these are the 3 main areas. So the application team has 3 active projects. 2 are on hold, 2 are green, 1 is red. This is the same free text form that would appear on their team sheets. This is just a list of all the projects. We used to take up much more real estate, kind of having those grids that I had on the other dashboards to display all this. And in the last year or so, we kind of just shrunk this down to be a report. We're a small enough team that most people know what's going on with everything, and they don't need to see all the data. And we have a good team. So, and we have a saying around here that red is the new green. So we encourage people to report yellow and red projects. And there's people aren't hiding things or not giving true updates. So we just summarize it in this report format. And then down here, this is the backlog for this team. So in the PMO meeting, application leader, what's going on in your area? This is going on. Great. Tell us what your top 2 or 3 projects, what's happening with those. Rick, what's going on? Why are you red? What help do you need? So on and so forth. Sanjay, you're green. Anything to tell us? Nope, it's on autopilot right now. Great. So on and so forth. So we go through the application team. We go through the data team, which is BI and other things, and talk about where they're at. And then we come down to the infrastructure team. And if you look at this, if you looked at what this said before, this is the free form text I had before. This is the same number of projects that I was showing before. This is a test update dynamics that I just made a couple minutes ago. These are the 2 projects we were showing, and so on and so forth. So all this flows from that workspace that holds all the data that the project manager owns and manages 100% by himself. I don't do anything on a week in or week out basis. I don't need to assist anybody. I don't need to tweak anything. I don't need to adjust anything. Project leads go in and do their status update, and that's most of what they need to do outside of running the actual project. And then that data flows from their own dashboard up to their team's dashboard, and up to the PMO dashboard. We don't use them anymore. Really, there's I may show you one if there's time at the end. You can create dashboards for anything, and we have done that in the past. Right now, it's mostly just this. So, all right. Any questions? Making good time here. Okay. All right. So this is where all the fun happens. So all the data for all the projects of any status are all stored in one sheet. So this smart sheet, this is 2019. So I guess I've been doing this for about 4 years. Lots of closed projects, some projects that are still active. The one I just blew by may have been the legacy. I didn't see one. Some active projects, some backlog projects are stored in here. And then down at the very bottom is this new project, which is that form that I filled out to begin everything. It's added here. It does not have a project number yet, and its status is new, which is how that dashboard knows to show it in the waiting activation bucket. And it's got the data that that I filled out on that form, which is a place to start. So everything is in here. So there's 150 projects in here, listed in here. Who manages them? What company are there for? We have different divisions. What function? I can mention we recently kind of collapsed these before we had supply chain and cybersecurity as their own things. We don't have those anymore. What program they're in. We have in the past used multiple levels of programs. Didn't really buy us much, so we stopped doing that. These are fields that just talk about what's the purpose of the project is. So from the enterprise, we have enterprise priorities. I don't think they appear. Yeah, so you can read that download. So we have these 5 priorities, and each project should belong to one of these. If not, it goes into something else bucket. But we should be doing, a project that's going to enhance how our retailers do, or how operational excellence, which is a lot of what we do, happens. And then same thing from the IT. We have similar priorities, security, operations, developing the team, and digital transformation, which is kind of everything else, kind of what the data team does day in and day out. And then these are the different status. This is the phases of the project, different statuses. For us, the red, yellow, green is calculated based on these 3 things. You don't need to go into that, but it's the red, yellow, green's calculated, so the project manager doesn't actually get to pick. And then status updates. This is the most recent status updates that we're looking at, and then dates. And then over here are a bunch of fields, which we won't look at, that enable the dashboards to work. And may kind of hint at that, but everything is stored in here, with one exception, and that is previous status updates. So there's a Smartsheet. So every time a status update happens, the old one gets copied to a different Smartsheet. Those are shown on dashboards by reports that we looked at on that very first project dashboard down at the bottom. But otherwise, everything's in here. And because everything's in here, everything that I'm doing on these dashboards is filtering, sorting, filtering everything by this project number 1, and then filtering everything by what team we're talking about, and then not filtering to cover everything in the PMO. I'm only showing things with certain statuses. I'm only showing things with certain dates in some circumstances, so on and so forth. So everything happens, everything is stored, and it also makes it dang easy to work with this stuff. It's all, this looks like a spreadsheet. So it's easy to use. When I activate this project, I'll give it a number. I'll give it IT 23-007, and I will set this to active. and everything will magically appear. All the data will appear to the project manager and then PMO members the moment that I do that. So that's that. And the last piece, I'll kind of just go through here. Yeah, we're good on time. So these are automations. So these are all automations that I have running against this Smartsheet. They're driven by dates, or they're driven by when data changes. So this first one, for example, I'll open it up here. It's a pretty simple one. It says when rows are added and the life cycle is set to new. Actually, this just doesn't go to me right now, but alert somebody. So send an alert to Sanjay, and it's going to have some of the data, just a summary. It's just going to say, hey, Rick opened a new project. Here's the title of it. Here's the start date. FYI. The PMO lead then, Sanjay does some of this work. I do some of this work. The PMO lead then takes those manual steps to create the project. They're rarely, if ever, surprised by a project being added. But this is a very simple automation that happens when new data is added to the sheet. Same thing when a project is closed, I get a notification. Again, there's maybe 5 minutes worth of manual work that I do to close it out, archive the data, so on and so forth. So this here. So this is the weekly status update. So this again is they're all very simple, quite frankly. But this one runs so on a date every week on Tuesday, starting back in August of 2020 at 7 a.m. for projects that are active or on hold. So ignore new projects, ignore backlog projects, ignore closed projects, obviously. Send to the project lead some data, and we can customize the message, which we don't do because everybody knows what it is, and you can include or exclude what files it are. So every 2 weeks on Tuesday at 7 a.m., all project managers get this status request update all at the same time. They click update, fill in a couple of fields, and click submit, and they're done. Some of these other automations, maybe they're just interesting. So here's the one I mentioned. It's a little more complicated, but so here, this is anytime a status update is done. So if I update the status of my project, meaning I update a date, I update the budget scope or timeline, or I update the status or the risk sections of the update. Anytime I update any of those things, which are all these fields plus a couple others, anytime I change any of those, so anytime scope changes to any value, I copy that row, the old row, off to the status archive. That's how we maintain the ongoing history of all the updates that went to each project. Runs flawlessly. That's probably the first time I've opened that screen since I created and tested that that automation. And then kind of these are, I mentioned before that there's some automations I used. So these fields, sort health, sort PMO, sort program, are fields that are used to control the dashboards. And when you close a project, the data is left there, and what ends up happening is closed projects can appear on the dashboards. So I just have a bunch of automations that when I set something to close, these are all triggered at the same time, and they just zero out all those values, so I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, and that's about it for let me look at my that's what I wanted to go through. Let's just look at a couple things here real quick. So this is out of date because of the changes we've made recently, but I mentioned this is the IT PMO meeting dashboard. I'll share this one, which is not out of date. So this is a different view of the IT PMO, and here all projects are in a Gantt chart, and then we just pull some basic census data from the projects. We used to look at this stuff every 2 weeks in the project manager in the PMO meeting, but it's boring. So I just moved it off to its own sheet. So it's referenceable, but we don't really look at it. And then you can use it for some other things. So we have digital signage here. So big TVs that are showing different things. And this is a dashboard that I showed. Again, we don't use this anymore because we collapsed data, engineering, finance, HR, infrastructure, legal, etc. We got rid of all that stuff, but this simplified dashboard, shows up in rotation on TVs around the buildings here. So just a quick sample of a different kind of dashboard that you can do. All this stuff is backed up on a weekly basis. It's a tool inside Smartsheet that allows you to back up. So everything's backed up. So if somebody made some egregious error, they could go back to a previous version of everything. And when the project's closed, I just download the latest backup. I force a final backup and then download that. And then I just delete everything. So, and then all that archive stuff is stored in our IT PMO channel and Teams where people could find it if they need to. And I mentioned that there's a backlog process. So the backlog process is almost identical to, well, it's just a very simplified version of the PMO. You fill out a form to add something to the backlog, or we change the status of a project that we, maybe we knew, but it's not activated. We set it back to backlog. So those are the two ways that things get added to the backlog. This is just showing that there's 5 projects and here's what the statuses are. And then this sheet, which is the list of all of them. And if I click on this, hopefully it opens up this in a bigger view, so we can just talk through these in the project, in the PMO meeting. We review our backlog every couple of months. So we know what's going on. Things don't get, it's not a tool that we use a lot, but the functionality is all built in here and it's all the same. And when I change something from backlog to active, it's all on that same sheet. All the data is the same. And everything just appears magically once I do that. So that's it. That's my presentation. I know I went quickly and I know I covered a lot of things. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, we have 2 questions on the chat. Do you use Smartsheet to manage project-specific action items and store deliverables?
Yep. So that's so that would be this project. So that, yeah, we use the project plan. I mean, we just use this as a project plan, right? You might use Microsoft Project or whatever tool. So the project manager creates this project to drive the actual deliverables and hit the actual milestones for the project. They can kind of enhance their use of this however they want. They could have this plan, it's turned off by default, but it can have its own automations, and it could send a notice to whoever's assigned a task if it's late. So when a date hits, project goes late, send a status update request to that project manager, saying, hey, what's going on with this task? And Smartsheet then would manage this sheet as well. We don't do a lot of that. People do it sometimes, but mostly the project managers and hold kind of manages the entirety of the project. So hopefully that was the question.
And then we have also another question. Do you have project members other than PMs update content?
Not that, so that's a good question. So projects, everything's in a workspace, as I mentioned, which is just a collection of folders and content, but I can share this workspace, and the only people that can see the workspace are the people that it's shared to. I don't have it shared to anybody right now, only myself, but if I was a project lead, I could share this workspace and give them access to doing different things in here, and they could update it. So typically when I create, not typically, always when I create a new project, I share it with two people. I share it with the project lead that's assigned, and I share it with their manager. Sometimes I'll share it with additional people if I know what's going on and I know they're going to need it, but I share it to the project lead and the manager themselves. So the manager, so that risk of kind of, I said before that, you know, one of the things that's out of a project manager's control is whatever their last status update was, anybody could see it. I might display it on that digital signage. It might show up in a meeting with the CEO. It might find its way in front of a customer sometime. And that's a risky thing. So by allowing multiple people to update that, right, the manager can kind of go in and say, well, Bill's on vacation. I'm going to update the status for him, on his behalf. And you could have project members do that as well. So yeah, we do that sometimes.
Another question, Bill. Do your PMs use Smartsheet to manage their individual projects? Are you utilizing it for sprints with a project?
What was that last part of that?
Are you utilizing it for sprints within a project?
We can. So we typically, our projects, our PMO projects are typically waterfall projects. They're larger and longer. Many of them take a year and a half, and they're not software development. So infrastructure, for example, right, this project just had a list of tasks. It was really just a checklist. So we don't typically manage things in an agile format for the PMO. We do that where most of our work happens, which is in Jira and with enhancements. But like I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know where I have to get back there somewhere. Down here, there's templates. So there's a template for agile project plan. So people could switch this in. They could get rid of the waterfall project plan. That's their default, and put this in here and update everything from here. So we do, but it's rare in the PMO.
That's great. Another question: what is the licensing like for Axis?
It's going to be different for every company. I want to say it's not very, it's a good deal. Only people with a license, you only pay for people with a license, and the vast majority of most of our project managers don't even have a license, because they're just updating data. I have a license because I'm doing all this, creating sheets and modifying sheets and all that kind of stuff. So I have a license. Most project managers, if they just use what I give them out of the box, meaning that they're just updating their status updates and doing that, they don't even need a license. So we have, I should have pulled that up. I think we pay $80, roughly $85 a year for each license. But that's going to vary by every company. It'll be different.
Another question, Bill. What is the storage capacity long term for historical project documents, large videos for those documents to be referenced or reused later, or can those be stored in a separate software and pulled in when needed?
Good question. So a sheet, this might be out of date, but as far as I know, a individual sheet, like what we're looking at right now, can have up to 5,000 rows. They may have expanded that. I'm not sure. We don't have anything near 5,000 rows. From our licensing, there's no limit on how much we can store, how many projects or sheets, or how much data it has. I didn't talk about any of this, but in any of these sheets, I can attach files to a row in a Smartsheet. So if I was working on a project and we hit our requirements document, I could actually attach that into Smartsheet and store it. And there's no limit that I'm aware of on any of that stuff. So it's essentially limitless. If it got out of hand, as I would say, you'd probably, if you were using it that much, you'd probably want to look at some integration maybe with an Oracle database or something where you could archive that stuff off to where it's, my guess is that the Smartsheet interface would get horrible. So anybody that's an admin, so I'm an admin, and I recently went through and really cleaned up a lot of stuff, but I can see all these things. And I can see all these are just individual sheets. 3 months ago, I had 3 times as much stuff in here. So if you had 600 projects floating out here, you wouldn't be able to find anything. So yeah, in that case, I would recommend some backup archiving.
Another question, do you use Smartsheet to actively track and manage project budgets and activity-based spending, or just report status from other systems?
We don't. We have other tools that we use for the budgeting. A lot of our projects don't really have a budget per se. We do a lot of, given our company history over the last few years, frankly, since I joined, most of our projects are compliance projects, so things that we have to do, or divestiture related projects, again, things that we have to do. And not to say that there's not budgets for those things. They're managed typically at a higher level. So we don't use, nobody, as far as I know, nobody uses Smartsheet for that kind of stuff. You could use it for anything.
One last question. You mentioned automated notifications on MS Team. Does Smartsheet connect with MS Teams or other MS Office apps?
With Teams, so here, where I'm sharing here, I was going to mention this, I believe I didn't want to open this before because it might go away. So you get notifications inside Smartsheet, the tool itself. So this is the same. I got an email that said, I should open up my email real quick. Right, so this is the request that I just clicked on this off screen, but this is the request that I got an email. Close that. And it should be, yeah, in Smartsheet, there's a notification from Smartsheet. And this is, I've been monkeying around with it the last couple of days, so there's a bunch of stuff in here. So this is the update. So I could open the update form from within Smartsheet, from my email, or from Teams. And I believe you can integrate it with Slack and other tools as well.
Thank you, Bill. I'll just share the code for PDU.
Okay.
Still the sharing.
Figure out how to get back to the chat while I was sharing that. By the way, I see a couple people on the list here that I know, so hello there. This is me, by the way, not some artificial AI talking.
Yeah, so before we end, just a quick reminder for how to find the events. It's like you go to PMINEO.org, and in the events here, you click, you'll see the calendar and the events that will coming up, and this is the code for people like to claim a code. For today, it's 1 BDU for ways of work. I'll leave it on the screen, and I will stop here. Thank you.
There's just one. I'm happy to answer if anybody has any questions or wants to get introduced to a Smartsheet sales guy who will pester you for the rest of your life.